Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to Let's Play Final Fantasy VI. I'm sure many of you are busy taking in the sights and the sounds of Final Fantasy 15. I know that's just going to date the LP, but what I've got in store for all of you is a sublime game. A real treasure from Final Fantasy's past. So I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to provide you with a boatload of information about the game, analysis, stuff that you probably haven't heard before. At least a few things, depending on how much of a diehard fan of the game you are. And I'm just going to gush about what is one of the best Final Fantasies ever made. Long ago, the War of the Magi reduced the world to a scorched wasteland, and magic simply ceased to exist. 1,000 years have passed, iron, gunpowder, and steam engines have been developed, and high technology reigns. Love this premise, by the way. But now, there are some who would enslave the world by reviving the dreaded destructive force known as magic. And that's our opening premise. That's the whole conceit of the game. Lovely. Can it be that those in power are on the verge of repeating a senseless and deadly mistake? And we are about to be introduced to the character who is arguably the main protagonist. But for now, she's kind of just a blank slate. But accompanying this character... oh, there they are. Biggs and Wedge. So Biggs and Wedge have brought our mystery protagonist along looking for something called an Esper in the city below. And we're also being introduced to the fact that our yet-to-be-named protagonist, why she's coming along with them, and what her whole deal is. The slave crown on her head makes her a mindless puppet. Such a cool premise that we're working with right off the bat. When I was in Canada, I was talking to Nate about D&D, and he was telling me about Dark Sun and the era of magic and how mages kind of ruined the whole world, so it fell out of vogue. I just adore that. Speaking of things that I adore... musically, we start off on such a good foot. This song is a variant of Terra's theme, which, lucky us, what luck would have it, it's the main theme of the game. So we're gonna hear variants on this core melody all throughout the game, and it's such a good one. It's one of my favorite pieces of music in all of Final Fantasy. It's the it's so fantastic and sensational, and it's the first in a slew of great tracks to come. You know what else 6 has? One of the best battle themes. It's like way up there with Final Fantasy 9's, Final Fantasy 4's. I think they're too close to call. Just across the board. S+. So fabulous. So fantastic. Oh, I'm so happy to be playing this, you guys. It's been too long. It's been too long since the FF8 LP. It's been too long of me just... I wanted to do this for such a long time, and we're finally here. We're gonna get control pretty soon. Before that happens, let's talk about how this is gonna work. So, how are we doing this? Very similarly to how we did FF8, if you watched that LP, and I think you should. It came out pretty well. And by that, I mean I'm going to be cutting out most of the random battles that don't feature a new enemy type, with the exceptions of ones in this first episode, because they are mostly scripted here. Rather, they're scripted to appear in set points here. Like our very first fight against the 2 soldiers. We get preemptive attack on them, and we're in these cool magicite mechs that we're controlling like the Bea mechas. And we get access to a bunch of cool Magitech spells. As far as like elemental weaknesses of these enemies coming up, we can really just use what we please. Biggs and Wedge have access to fire, ice, and lightning beams, which they all just do about the same. We're gonna one-shot pretty much everything. We also have Magitech missiles for our mystery protagonist. I'm like, the reveal of her name is coming up in the next 10 minutes or so. I'm not gonna keep calling her the mystery protagonist. Terra. I even spilled the beans on that being Terra's theme not too long ago. Terra. Terra has a couple of extra capabilities for reasons that we will find out about in the course of due time. But for now, we're just gonna melt everything. These battles that we have coming up, we are not up against anything too threatening. We're entirely overpowered for the beginning part of this. We're really just getting a nice organic feel for how the combat works. And this is going to teach us a very important mechanic. This is going to teach us about formations, because we're caught in a pincer attack. So unlike Final Fantasy VIII, we have access to formations. Formations were a big thing pretty much in just about every Final Fantasy up until 8, right? 7 had the formation system, right? Pretty sure it was featured in every game up to that point, and then 8 and 9 are where that fell off. You saw it before we got caught in a pincer, and our nice bio bomb from Terra was only able to clear half the screen. Normally, when you're in a non-pincer fight, you could just clear everything all at once with that. As we're going to see here, because Terra's going to be the first with her ATB full. Bioblasts. The Megalodons are going to be Megalodon, because everything's on that side of the screen, so this is just going to annihilate everything. So in addition to these positional plays that the enemies can be in, you also have a front and a back row for your characters. Characters in the front row take normal damage and deal normal damage. And in the back row, I believe damage taken and dealt is halved. But the penalty to damage dealt by characters in the back row is usually limited to attack commands. So a lot of the spells that you wind up casting and a lot of other special commands do not get affected like that, which is very, very nice. And since we're one-shotting everything at this early point in the game, there's really no downside to putting Biggs and Wedge and Terra in the back row. There's no real upside either. I mean, you have to try pretty damn hard for a full party wipe in the beginning of the game here. It's just getting, like I say, it's giving you an organic feel for how the combat plays out. For how the battle system works, for the ATB gauge, which we'll get more into in due time. We're going to take a real deep dive in this game, so I can't cover everything in episode 1, so we'll get into the stats and the nitty-gritty and the ATB and all that cool stuff in a little bit. So Biggs is going to take care of the obstruction by just tackling it head on. And it's free. It leaves us free to proceed onwards into the cave. But the guard doesn't want us getting near the Esper. What the Esper is, we'll find out about soon. In our way is our very first boss battle. It's a giant snail, a lightning snail. It's Ymir. And Emir, despite just being a snail, is kind of a cool fight. It's a very solid starter fight. As Biggs and Wedge are explaining, we should not attack the shell. We have 2 targets in this fight, his head and his shell. If you attack the shell, Ymir counters with a spell called Megavolt, which is hugely damaging. It's one of the only ways you can actually feasibly lose. You can game over in the beginning of the game. Pretty much the only way that's gonna happen. So you just want to kill the head. The problem is he occasionally does this. He occasionally retreats into a shell, so if you have an attack queued up for the head, and he retreats before that attack is executed, you will hit the shell instead and get megavolted. So the rule of thumb here is each party member gets 1 attack each time he pokes his head out. Unless the ATB gauge is being particularly unkind to you, and you just get a little bit unlucky and lose an attack. Also, if you want to run him out of MP by triggering his Megavolt, he can only do it about 6 or 7 times. So you can trigger the Megavolt, heal, trigger it, and keep repeating that. And then eventually he won't have the mana to counter you anymore, and you can kill the shell. And if you kill the shell and the head together, you get an Ether, which is an MP restorative, in addition to the high potion you would normally get for beating him. But that takes ages, and it is so not worth it. So we're just straight up not gonna fucking do that. Man, it's a joy to be playing FF6 again. It's been a really long time since I got to do this. This came from such a golden era of JRPGs. This SNES golden era. Oh man. This came out in pretty close proximity to Chrono Trigger, and you can kind of see that, like, this was a very late in life Super Nintendo game. So the bells and whistles on it are pristine. Man, oh, I love this so much. We haven't even gotten to some examples of where this game shines the brightest, which is actually in the writing. Feels like it's been a really long time since I could say that about a Final Fantasy game. But every character is full of so much personality and expression and charm. It's just an absolute fucking joy. I realized I never finished my thought on how we're gonna be going through this. We've reached the Frozen Esper. Yeah, so most of the random battles that don't feature a new enemy type or something that I'm looking to specifically show off, they're gonna get cut in post. If there's any kind of backtracking, significant backtracking that needs to be done, or running around, or grinding, that'll be all off screen. I'm gonna try to make this as smooth a viewing experience as possible, because JRPGs can be kind of hard to LP. They can be a little bit difficult to watch someone else play. So we're gonna try to edit around that. Luckily, FF6 is fucking radical, so shouldn't be that hard. As for how we're playing the game, or what we're playing it on, what version, I'm playing... Oh no, she has amnesia now that the crown has been removed. That pulsing effect is really good. I'm playing the Super Nintendo version of the game patched with updated translations, which take care of a lot of the censorship issues that were prominent on the original SNES release, and some of the wonkier localizations, which are really only the only flaws of the Super Nintendo version of the game, were some of the localizations. So yeah, I'm playing... Hey, and we now know her name. I don't like that portrait art as much as I like her sprite. I actually kind of wish this game didn't have portrait art. I think the sprites leave a good amount to the imagination that the portraits almost ruin a little bit. So we are playing the Super Nintendo version patched with more accurate translations and localizations. Just a way better experience on that end. They use the GBA translations as a base. Also, I'm not going to read out every line of dialogue. I'll read out some of the more important bits of narration, and I'll summarize big plot points for the people who are just kind of using this as an audio podcast about FF6. I don't think that's the way this game is meant to be enjoyed, or this LP, but I know some people do that, so it would take ages to read out every single line of dialogue. Not going to do that. Important bits, yeah. And summaries ahoy. So, we're currently escaping. We had some kind of weird interaction with the Frozen Esper back in the cave of Narsha. That has led to the destruction of that Magitech armor she was riding around in. That kind of ride-on, the Mega Man X ride-on armor. And she was rescued by this mysterious old man who removed the slave crown. So she's currently undergoing a bout of amnesia. As for the... Oh, you know what? Now that I have Biggs and Wedge in mind, actually, you can actually tell this is a much better translation of the SNES version of the game right off the bat, because Biggs is not named Vix in this. Vix was the name Biggs got in the original SNES version of the game. Biggs and Wedge, by the way, are commonly recurring Final Fantasy characters. You'll recognize them as the Galbadian soldiers from FF8 if you watched my LP of that, or if you have played Final Fantasy before. Their names are references to Luke's wingmen from A New Hope. And I like the way they play with the amnesia trope here. Trite as it is, they handle it pretty well. Because you get sizable chunks of her memory coming back as exposition very early on. They don't drag the reveals about her memory and her past out. And this character here, Kefka. Oh, Kefka. Oh, Kefka. Burn up everything. Kefka is, bar none, my favorite Final Fantasy villain. He is the best, and there is no close competition to him. I think a distant second might be Kuja from FF9. But again, that's a distant second. So remember way back in the beginning, the bit of narration about how someone or some place were seeking to resurrect the use of magic to conquer the world? Well, there we go. Really simple, to the point. So we get a huge exposition dump as Terra starts to rapidly retrieve some of her lost memories. The worst thing you can do with an amnesia plotline is stagger the reveal slowly, like glacial amnesia reveal. Oh yeah, yeah! Ah, it's the best. Locke is here. The worst thing you could do is make those reveals like glacial. I prefer the term treasure hunting. Fuck, I love Locke so much. Oh, Jesus, I love this game. So Locke is gonna be our next party member. I'm trying to think of a good parallel to FF8, since that's the other Final Fantasy that I've LP'd. Zell, I guess he kind of fits in that role. But character archetypes are much, much different in this. Like, Terra is certainly no Squall, and Locke he's a little more carefree, a little more easygoing, which is why I compare him to Zell. But That's kind of where the differences, or that's kind of where the similarities end, rather. So to get back to what I was saying, there are two ways to play Final Fantasy VI that are far and away better than any other option you have. You can play the original Super Nintendo version, or in my case, a ROM patched with good translations, or the GBA version, which also takes some doctoring in the to get it running in the form of fan-made ROM hacks to fix the brightness, because the GBA the version really amped the brightness up to compensate for the dimmer screen. And there's also a sound restoration patch for the GBA version that uses Super Nintendo music and sound effects. Because the GBA version, the GBA itself has a sound chip that is vastly inferior to that of the Super Nintendo. So here we have a couple of different parties we can use, and the goal is to stop the advancing Megalodons and soldiers from reaching the unconscious Terra. We have this group. It's hard to tell them apart until you go into the menu. We have this group of Mogzi, Mogwin, Mugmug, and Cosmog. The rule of thumb here is that if they are not named Mog or Lock, they are expendable jobbers. I don't actually think there's a proper game over state here, even if they do reach Terra. And if you lose party members, they just go back. Like, if you experience a full party wipe, they just go back to Terra with 1 health. So what I like to do here is I just run out the jobber Moogles until they have no life left in their worthless husks. And that leaves my my good party, the party with Locke in it and the party with Mog in it, to take on everything relatively pain-free. The reason that I am not playing the GBA version of FF6 is because even with the sound restoration patch, the sound quality of the GBA version is so damn bad that I just couldn't. It's really unpleasant to listen to. There's a lot of background noise. No, I can't. So what we miss out on from the GBA version otherwise is a dungeon, a few extra espers that the GBA version has, and a couple of other, I think, relatively minor things. And if their omission winds up being too much of a problem, I might do a separate GBA playthrough on my own time, just to have a save file around so I can cut in with a bonus episode to show the GBA exclusive stuff off. But as is, I really think the Super Nintendo version is probably the best way to play Final Fantasy VI. If it's anything other than the GBA or the SNES version, I know there's going to be debate between the two. Feel free to debate in the comments, or offer me a save file for the GBA version so I can show all that stuff off in the comments. Yeah, but if it's anything other than the GBA or the SNES versions, I wouldn't bother with it. It's kind of a shame that so many of the ports for this are so problematic, because the actual quality of the game is unassailable. Also, this is one of the things that makes Mog so damn good. Mog has a special dance command where he gets to play Twilight Requiem, which can do all sorts of really nasty stuff to a mob of enemies. I think now is about the time. Had a little bit of trouble switching over there. Just tapping the button maybe a little too quick. Now's a good time to switch over to Locke's party. Oh, damn. The Megalodon. You get introduced to the Megalodon like as one of the earliest enemies, and you get the impression that it's just going to be the simplest cakewalk of an enemy. And they dispel that notion very, very quickly. So we were keeping Locke fresh for this fight against the Elite Guard, which is technically our second boss fight. He comes flanked with 2 Silver Lobos. We only want to kill one of them. If you kill both of them, then the Elite Guard starts using an attack called Charge. And Charge will just about one-shot any of the party members, so yeesh. It's also really unlucky that I didn't steal anything. I'm pretty sure the guard has stuff in both slots. There's some really, really in-depth mechanics surrounding Locke's steal command, which we'll have time to get into in the next episode. We're coming up on time for this one. We just have to deal with the Elite Guard here. I accidentally targeted the Lobo down, so glad we only had a couple hits left on the guard. The important thing is that Locke and Mog are fine and they got some XP. Thanks, Moogles. Yeah, Moogles, you guys rock. Okay, so we're gonna take Terra back to a safe spot that's not being relentlessly assailed by guards from the Empire. And what do we have here? We have a switch that's going to open up a back door into the caves of Narsh. Narsh, Narsh, Narsh. And Terra appears to have recovered from her fall down 1 floor into the cave, 1 story down. 1 cave story down. Aha. The sprite work they do in this is so good. The animations, just the little details, like when Locke was wagging his finger at the camera and it's just like 1 or 2 pixels. Facial expressions get so detailed in this for the types of sprites these are. Oh man, it's just so good. Love you, Final Fantasy VI. Up. And there goes our secret back entrance into the cave. And look at this. Suddenly, we're out onto the world map already. So I think that's going to do it for now. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take it easy. Have a good one.